someone from Chandigarh. I saw someone from Kolkata, Gurgaon, Delhi. So Elvish from Delhi, Kriti from Bangalore, Kaustubh from Noida, Vasu from Bangalore again. I see someone from Coimbatore, Mumbai, London. Okay. Anyone else who's dialing in from outside of India? Welcome, Mudit. Welcome, Zishan. I see Rupranchi from Meghalaya. So welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be hosting you for this extremely insightful session that we are going to host today. Thank you for coming in. I'm going to do brief introductions very shortly, but I still want the audience, everyone, to be connected before I do that. So in the meanwhile, please let us know the city you're dialing in from. Keep those responses coming, and we start very shortly. All right. Great. So I see a lot of those responses have come in. Great. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sanjay Dhingra. I'm a co-founder and the chief operating officer at Seed Global Education. Those of you who have attended our sessions in the past, similar sessions in the past, would know that we work with some of the best B schools in the world, some of the best engineering schools in the world as well, to bring you master classes and interactions similar to what we are doing today. In today's session, we are going to be hosting Singapore Management University, especially their School of Computing and Information Systems, to talk about a very interesting and emerging topic, which is about identifying optimal solutions to business problems through prescriptive analytics. So those of you who have seen the topic, you would understand that this is an emerging field. We have all experienced surge pricing, whether it's Ola, Uber, or we have seen prices of air tickets going up when we have checked out the website. All of this is driven by prescriptive analytics and some or the other analytics in some form or the other. And I have personally always been curious to know more about how these companies really manage to do this and how they get the maximum value or maximum price money from our end to really cater to our needs and still extract the most value for themselves as well and their shareholders. So in today's session, we are going to speak with Dr. Michelle Chong, who is a professor of information systems at SMU School of Computing and Information Systems. She's also the associate dean of the postgraduate professional education and the director of their engineering program, the Doctor of Engineering program. So we are going to speak to her very shortly. But before we do that, I'm going to quickly run our polls for the evening. These are two quick polls to get an understanding if you have any background in data analytics or what is your current level of understanding of the field. So if you can see on your screen right now, the poll is live right now. The first question is, do you have any background in data analytics? This could be through your education or through your work experience or any projects that you may have done. So if you have studied courses related to data analytics, you have worked in the industry, data sciences, data analytics, then choose yes. If you haven't, then that's no. If you're keen to learn about the field and you understand that it's an emerging field with a lot of potential, then choose the third option. The second question which we have for you is, according to you, what are the three highest levels of analytics? Is it descriptive, prescriptive, or perspective analytics? Is it perspective, descriptive, and predictive? And the third option is descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. So I know some tongue twisters over there, but exciting to see you go through those. If you have gone through a landing page properly, you'll know what the correct answer is. The information about this was in the description of the session. So if you have read through it properly, you should know this. But the poll questions are live on your screen right now. The questions are, firstly, do you have any background in data analytics? If yes, then yes, choose the first option. If no, then that's the second option. If you're keen to learn, you're curious, if you don't have any background, but very keen to learn about it, then choose the third option. And the next question is, what, according to you, are the three highest levels of analytics which companies use today? And this is used by all companies you can think of, right? From Uber, Ola, the hotel company, airline companies, Make My Trip, Booking.com, across all the industries possibly you can think of, this is being used more and more. So according to you, what are the three highest levels of analytics that are used in the industry currently? Are those descriptive, prescriptive, perspective, descriptive, predictive, or descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive? So let us know what your responses are. We have around 70 responses to this poll. We have around 150 people in the session already. So I'm going to keep this poll open for another 5 seconds. So if you haven't responded, please do that. And we'll start with the session very shortly. All right, with that, I'm going to end the polls and show the results as well. So around 15% of the audience have some background in data analytics. Around 39% have no background. Around 47%, 50% approximately of the audience are very keen to learn about this field. And you're correctly choosing this option mainly because there's tremendous potential in the industry and in this field to make a career in. And this is across the world, right? Whether it's Singapore, Hong Kong, United States, Europe, across, or even in India, the field has extremely high potential. The second question was, what are the three highest levels? Unfortunately, a majority of you are wrong. The correct answer is the third option, which is descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. So prescriptive analytics is what we are going to speak about today. That's the third highest level of analytics used in the industry after descriptive and predictive. And with that, I'm going to hand over the audience and hand over the session to Professor Michelle Chong to tell us more about this field of prescriptive analytics and how companies use this to optimize their business problems, optimize solutions to their business problems. Over to you, Professor.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for attending my session. As introduced, I am the Associate Dean of the Postgraduate Professional Programs at the School of Computing and Information Systems at SMU. So today I'm talking about how do you identify the optimal solutions to business problems. So perhaps I start off with answering what is optimization. So our objective of doing optimization is really to determine the optimal solution. When we say optimal solution, we are looking for the best answers to a problem. So you may be thinking, how do I know that my answer is the best? There must be a measure to tell you that you have reached the best answer. And that measure is called the objective. So when we say we reach the best answer, that particular measure must be either maximized or minimized. So this particular measure or objective in the business sense is usually a cost or a profit. So for business, they are usually keen to maximize profit or minimize costs. We will be looking at several classes of problems in optimization. However, due to time today, I will only be covering linear programming and some integer programming problems. So the whole classes, different classes of problems also include nonlinear programming. So the programming, many people think that, oh, I need to write programs. In fact, yes and no. If you can use tools such as Excel, there is no programming because Excel has a built-in cost solver. All you need to do is to set up solver and optimal solution can be found. I will be demonstrating that for several problems later on. But there will also be software that you can write programs to find the optimal solutions. So the first class of problems that we look at is called linear programming. The word linear is important because in linear programming, we are trying to either maximize or minimize the objective. So this objective, usually we call it the linear cost function or linear profit function. So of course, when it's cost function, we tend to minimize. When it's profit function, we will tend to maximize. So the word linear would mean that the equation must be a linear line. So I suppose you understand what is linear. When we are younger, we would have learned the equation of a straight line is y equals to mx plus c. So when we have y equals to mx plus c, the meaning is this. For a change in x, the change in y will be linear. But our world is more complicated than one x affecting one y. We could be having multiple x's affecting one y. For example, you may want to increase your sales. You want to optimize your sales. Your input, which are your x's, could be x1 is the amount of marketing dollar you will spend. X2 could be the price of your product. And X3 could be the price of your competitors' products. Because of the different x's, they are going to affect your y. But the relationship between y and x is a linear function. So the objective or the particular measure must be a linear equation. And it is also, the problem has to be subjected to constraints, which are also linear. And these constraints can either be equality or inequality constraints. There are always three types of components in a linear programming model. First is the input. The input is the one that we want to determine the best answer. And how do we know we are the best answer? Because the output is the one that will be maximized or minimized. And there will be constraints to determine your answers, which are within a restricted region That means your answer cannot be outside this restricted region, or we call it the feasible region. So I will explain more about this using an example later on. So let me just start off with a small brain teaser. Imagine now you have $10 and you would like to buy some fruits, either apples or oranges. And we know the apple costs 50 cents, while an orange costs $1. If your objective is to bring home as many fruits as possible, the question now is, how many apples and oranges can you buy to maximize the number of fruits you can bring home? So you have to spend within the $10, so that $10 is a constraint. You know that the apple costs 50 cents each and the orange costs $1 each. So for now, the question is how many apples and oranges you should buy to maximize the number of fruits that you can bring home. So this is a simple question, and you can roughly guess that the answer is 20 apples and 0 oranges. Because the apples are cheaper, you buy more apples, you will bring home more fruits. So this is a simple question. Let me just change the question slightly. What if now I give you a second constraint? You are to bring home more oranges than apples. You still have your $10, which is your first constraint. The apple still costs 50 cents, the orange still costs $1, and your objective is the same, to bring home as many fruits as possible, subject to 2 constraints. First, your $10, and second, you're supposed to bring home more oranges than apples. So how many apples and oranges should you buy to maximize the number of fruits that you can bring home? So now you would think, what are the possible answers? Your possible answer could be, maybe I'll bring home 10 apples and 20 oranges. That will satisfy the first constraint. However, that will not satisfy the second constraint. And then you can go on and on and on to have different combinations. And you realize that some answers are not possible because you will violate the constraint. While some answers could be possible, but you are not spending to the maximum of your $10 availability. So the correct answer is actually, you will bring home 6 apples and 7 oranges. That will bring home a total of 13 fruits. So when you start to have such problems, what's actually going on in your brain when you try to look for the answer? You are thinking of all the possible combinations to get the best answer. This is exactly what happened in a prescriptive analytics problem. The machine that is going through all the possible combinations will help you to find the best answer. So let me move on to a problem which is more of a business nature. Imagine now you're running a consulting company, undertaking different projects. And you have 3 types of manpower in your company, M1, M2, and M3, and you have 4, 12, and 18 of them. You're able to take up 2 types of projects, and each project will bring home $3 and $5 respectively. When you assign manpower to each project, you will start to consume manpower. For example, project 1 will consume 103 manpower, and project 2 will consume 022 manpower. So the question now is, how many of each project type should you undertake to maximize your total revenue? So let's have a picture representing this problem. So you have 4 types of manpower 1, 12 of manpower 2, and 18 of manpower 3. And this is a consumption table, and this is the revenue that you will earn. So now if I start to assign manpower to each project type, project 1 and project 2, I will start to consume my manpower. And if I were to do 1 of each project, I will earn $3 times 1 project of type 1 plus $5 of 1 project of type 2. That means I earn $8. However, you can see that you're not consuming your manpower to the maximum. So let's try another answer. I will now randomly assign people or manpower to the different problems, different projects, and I could end up having 4 project 1 and 3 project 2, and still have manpower 2, 6 of them left over. If this is the answer, that means that you will earn $27. So you have to ask yourself, is this the best answer? So let us find the best answer. To find the best answer, you have to start to determine what are you trying to look for. I'm looking for the input, which is the number of project 1 and project 2. We call that the decision variables. And I do have input parameters that help me, like $3 and $5 for each project type. And I have the consumption of manpower, which is 103 and 022. And I do have constraints, which is the availability of each manpower type, which is 4, 12, and 18. So now to solve this problem, I will then write out the formula. The formula looks like this. The measure or the objective function is the total revenue that you earn, and you would like to maximize it. And for each project type, you will earn $3 and $5 respectively. And in this case, we are summing up the total revenue, and this equation is a linear equation. For the manpower consumption, we know that it's a 103 and 022. If I were to put it into these equations, the first line will be consumption of manpower 1, second line will be manpower 2, and third line will be manpower 3, and they are subjected to the availability of 4, 12, and 18. If I were to simplify them, I will have these constraints equations. And the non-negativity constraints would mean that I would like to take a non-negative number of projects, which means that the number of projects must be equals to greater than or equals to 0. And the decision variables would be the number of projects that I would undertake. So let's look at this. This is the objective function, which is the measure you want to maximize. This is the constraint, and this is the non-negativity constraints, and this is the decision variable. So how does the machine actually solve for the answer? So let me represent this on a graph. So if x1 is a number of project 1 and x2 is a number of project 2, my first constraint says x1 must be less than or equals to 4, which means that the left-hand side is possible, the right-hand side is not. I will shade away the right-hand side. The second constraint says x2 must be less than or equals to 6, which means the lower half is possible, the upper half is not possible. So I will shade it away. And the third constraint says 3x1 plus 2x2 must be less than or equals to 18. So for something like that, it kind of looked difficult, but it is actually not. A line like this would split the space into the lower half and the upper half. So what you need to do is to pick a point. Usually we will pick an easy point. For example, if I were to pick 0, 0, that means x1 is 0 and x2 is 0, and I'll put it into this equation. When x1 is 0 and x2 is 0, our left-hand side will be 0. So is 0 less than or equals to 18? Of course, the answer is yes. So this means that this point is possible. That would mean the upper half is not possible. Then we will shade that away. And together with the non-negativity constraint, we will shade the rest of the region, and we will be left with this feasible region. What does a feasible region mean? That means any answers within this region is a possible answer. It's a feasible answer. But we are not interested in just any feasible answer. We are interested in the best answer. So how do you get the best answer? We will look at the objective function or that measure that we want to maximize. So we would like to plot this line onto the chart. To plot this line, we have to be a little bit clever about this. If we have 3 and 5, then we will choose a nice number for the z. Let's say we choose 15, because 15 is divisible by 3 and 5. So how do we plot this line? If I assume x1 to be 0, x2 will end up to be 3. If I assume x2 to be 0, x1 will be equal to 5. So that will mean that I have these 2 points, which will be equal to 15. And I will join this line because this is a linear equation. And this line represents the $15 line. If you were to do any project along this line, you will earn only $15. As mentioned, we want the optimal solution. We want to earn more money. So we could move this line up, or we could move this line down. To maximize, we move it up. And we'll move until we are unable to move beyond the feasible region, because otherwise we'll end up in the infeasible region. So our best answer is you should be undertaking 2 project 1 and 6 project 2, And if you put that into the equation, you will get $36. So the optimal solution is solved using this way. I have used a picture to show you. However, we can always use an automated tool, for example, Solver, to help us solve problems which are much bigger than this. So let me just explain. In prescriptive analytics, the difficulty is in formulating the problem. That is the most critical first step. Once you formulate the problem, you can solve it using tools, the optimization tools. For example, today I'll be using the Excel solver. There are other tools like Lingo, Cplex, which you have to write some programs, and they will be able to solve the problems for you. Let me show you how to solve this project manpower problem using Excel. So I'm going to switch over to the Excel tool. So in this case, you see that I have put in all the parameters into Excel. So these are just numbers, no magic about it. And I would have two cells that will define the best answer that I'm trying to determine. And this is the calculation which will allow me to calculate the amount of manpower I will consume when I assign manpower to different projects. For example, if I do one project 1, I will consume 103. If I do one project 2, I will consume 022. The same for the revenue, I will multiply by $3 for each project that I conduct for project type 1, and the same for project type 2. And now if I were to sum it up, that would be the total amount of revenue I would earn. And this pink cell is a cell that I would maximize. If I were to sum up the manpower, these three cells will be the manpower that I will consume. And this consumption cannot exceed my availability. All right. So in setting up the problem onto Excel, you must be able to draw the tables, perform the simple Excel formula to do the calculations. Now let me put this back to 0 and 0. So now instead of manually trying to figure out the different combinations, we'll use the tool Solver to do the solution. So Solver is found under Excel under Data, and that is Solver. So when you activate Solver, a window like this will appear. So it seems that Solver has already been defined, but this is not the case. This is because I've already put them in, therefore it is saved together with this model. If you were to set this up the very first time, it should be empty. All right, let me just reset all to set them back to empty. So this is how it should look like when you first activate Solver. You are supposed to determine the rest of the cells. For example, the first cell, objective. This is a cell that is the measure that you either maximize or minimize. So in our case, that will be this pink cell, which represents the revenue that we would like to maximize. The changing cell is the input cells, which we want to find the best answer. And we will have to add in the constraints that define the problem. This is the consumption cannot exceed the availability. So this sign here, there are other signs like equal, greater than or equals, integer, binary, or different. In our case, it is less than or equal. And then we click add, we will add the constraint to the problem. And now this is defined, and we can just click solve. And the system will just go through all possible answers and tell you that the best answer is 2, 6, and your maximum revenue is $36. So this is an example. We can now look at other examples. Let me get back to my slides. Let's look at another example. So this is an exercise one where it's talking about police department needing to respond to the place a call for help when they patrol their neighborhood. And the neighborhoods are simplified. They are laid out in rectangular blocks, and the patrol vehicle will then travel horizontal and vertical road segments, which forms the boundary of the neighborhood. At any point in time, the nearest vehicle that is able to respond to the place a call for help will have to travel 1/3 horizontal distance X and 1/3 vertical distance Y. So what this means is there will be a few vehicles around you, but on average, the nearest one is 1/3 X and 1/3 Y away from the place that call for help. To ensure that the vehicle must patrol, there will be a constraint that the vehicle must complete or cover rectangular perimeter of minimum 10 km and maximum 12 km. And to ensure that there will be areas which are all overlapping areas that are covered, the vertical patrol distance must be at least 50% more than the horizontal patrol distance. This is to ensure that every area is covered by the patrol vehicle. And the average speed of the vehicle is 20 and 15 respectively on the horizontal and vertical, because patrol vehicles are not supposed to run too fast, right? And now our problem is, can we formulate the model to determine the patrol distances to achieve the fastest response time to the place that call for help? So you can imagine this to be also a similar problem where you call for maybe an Uber taxi. What would be the average distance between you and the nearest vehicle? But of course, in my case, I'm talking about police department patrol vehicle. So to represent this problem, let me just draw a picture. I let X be the horizontal distance and Y be the vertical distance, and T is the average response time that I must optimize. And in our case, we will minimize this particular T. So at any point in time, there will be different patrol vehicles, and we would like to determine what is this X and what is this Y. So on average, the nearest vehicle that will respond to the place that call for help is 1/3 distance X and 1/3 distance Y away. So this is a little bit of physics, but simple physics. The time to respond to the place that call for help is calculated as the distance divided by the speed. So this is the average distance divided by the speed on X plus the average distance on Y divided by the speed on Y. So this will be the total time taken to respond, and we will minimize it. And this is actually subjected to some kind of constraints where the rectangular patrol perimeter must be between 10 and 12. The overlapping constraint is that the vertical distance must be at least 50% more than the horizontal distance. So we are supposed to determine the best value for the X and Y. If you were to solve it, you will know that X is 2 and Y is 3, and you put 2 and 3 into this equation, your objective function value, which is the measure, will be 0.1 hour. Let me show you how to do that on Excel. So I'm on exercise 1. I've laid this out. So the X and Y are the two inputs that I'm trying to determine the best answer. The perimeter will be 2 times X plus Y, and is subjected to a maximum of 12, minimum of 10. And the second constraint is that the vertical distance must be at least 1.5 times of the X. We know that the average distance away is always 1/3 X and 1/3 Y. The speed is 20 and 15 respectively. Therefore, the time taken will be the average distance divided by the speed on the X, the average distance divided by the speed on the Y. And when I sum this up, this will be the total time taken. And we know that we will minimize this cell by changing these two input numbers. Again, you can manually try that, but of course, you can also use solver to find the best answer. So I'm going to go to solver. Again, this is being determined. Let me reset all. And this is where we will start. We will set the objective cell, which is this cell. And in this exercise, we would like to minimize. And we will be changing this to input cells. We can add in our constraints. Our perimeter must be less than or equal to the maximum of 12. We click add. And the same parameter must be greater than or equals to 10. And finally, our vertical distance, Y, must be at least. So at least would mean greater than or equals to 1.5x. Click add. And once you've defined all this, you can just click solve. And of course, I've told you the optimal answer is 2 on the X, 3 on the Y, and the average time taken is 0.1 hour, that is 6 minutes. So this is the second exercise. I will now go on to the third exercise. Now, this is a different problem. This is like a town management problem. If your town council or the town manager office would like to now install lamps on a certain stretch of roads, and this new stretch of road has different segments, and each segment I will be illuminated by J lamps. So imagine now I have N segments of roads. So I let I be the road segment number, so it'll be road segment 1, road segment 2, all the way to road segment N. And we know that they are illuminated by lamps, and with N road segment, I will have N plus 1 lamp. For each of the lamp, they have different powers, P1, P2, P3, up to Pn plus 1. And the smallest lamp that you can buy is P minimum. So this means that the smallest lamp that you can buy from any shop or any store is P minimum. Each road segment, 1 all the way to N, has to achieve a minimum desired illumination brightness, Li. This is because different segment of the roads, some could be a bit darker, so you have to perhaps use lamps which are more powerful, and so on. So the further the lamp is from the road segment, the illumination provided will be reduced. For example, if you're looking at road segment 1, perhaps lamp 1 and lamp 2 will provide the most illumination, and lamp N plus 1 will provide the least because it's furthest away. The amount of illumination provided by lamp J for road segment I is given by Aij times Pj. Now, this is just a parameter Aij that will multiply by the power of the lamp. So now the question is, formulate the model so that you can determine the power for each of these lamps to achieve the minimum desired illumination brightness for each of these roads, minimizing the total cost of purchasing the lamp. So now if I were to let I be the road segment, J to be the lamp, Pj will be the power of the lamp subjected to the minimum lamp power of P minimum. Aij is just some coefficient that I can multiply by the power to determine the amount of illumination on each road segment. And Li is the minimum desired illumination on each road segment. So my objective here is to buy the correct lamp that will be able to satisfy the constraint and yet at a minimum cost. We know that the higher the power of the lamp, the more expensive it will be. So the total cost is dependent on the total power of all the lamps. So this symbol over here means sum. So I'm going to sum the power of all the lamps from the first lamp all the way to the last lamp. So this particular equation looks interesting, but in fact it is also represented by this simple equation, which means P1 plus P2 all the way to Pn plus 1. And our constraint is that the illumination provided by all the lamps must be greater than or equals to the illumination desired. So this equation here is saying, let me sum up all the illumination provided by all the lamps, and it must be greater than the illumination required by the lamp. And this particular symbol here, it just means repeat for all the road segments. So if I were to rewrite this in simple formula, this is what it means. Illumination provided by all the lamps for road segment 1 must be greater than the illumination desired for road segment 1. You repeat that for road segment 2 all the way to road segment N. And the next constraint is the power of the lamp must be at least be greater than or equals to the minimum power. And if I rewrite this, this is actually what it means. P1 is greater than a P minimum, P2 is greater than P minimum, all the way to the last lamp, Pn plus 1. So we are supposed to solve and find out what lamp that we should buy. So let me bring you to the Excel to see how to solve this problem. So this is exercise 2. So let me set it to 5, and J would naturally be 6 because it's N plus 1. And I set the minimum of the power to be 400. So we have to define I and J because that will allow us to define how big the table would be. We know that Excel is a 2-dimensional table. So if the row segment is 1 to 5, there will be 1 to 6 lamps. These are the Aij numbers. These are just random numbers that I have generated. And for each of these lamp, this will be the power that I must determine to buy the best lamp. For each of these road segments, these are the desired illumination. If I sum up all the power, that will be the total cost that I have to pay, which is dependent on the power. So now let me multiply the illumination provided by each lamp on each road segment. So after that, I can sum up all the illumination provided by all the lamps for the first road segment. That will give me the total illumination. And let me repeat that for all the lamps, for all the road segment. So I know that the total illumination provided must be greater than or equal to the illumination desired. So with this, I can now go on to solver. Again, this is preset. Let me reset all. So I would like to determine the total power, and I want to minimize it because I want to save costs, and changing the total power for each of the lamp. At the constraints, the illumination provided must be greater than or equal to the illumination desired. I click that, and the power of the lamp must be greater than or equal to the minimum power, and I click that. So once all these are defined, you can now click solve, and you'll be able to determine the best lamp that you can buy to illuminate your roads. And of course, being 400 is the minimum number, so most of the lamps should be 400 because you're trying to minimize your cost, but there will be some road segments where the lamp will have to be bigger power than that. So this is the optimal solution. Let me move on to our last problem. Sorry. There you are. So this is my last problem. This is a more difficult problem because it's a three-dimensional problem. I have I neighborhoods, J schools, G grades offered at each school. So imagine these are children going to school. They are coming from different neighborhoods. This could be neighborhood 1, this could be neighborhood 2. And each neighborhood have different number of students going to study at different grades. And these are the different schools. And each school will have different number of seats available for students to study at different grades. So I let each school J to have capacity CJG for grade G. So this is the number of seats for each grade at each school. Each neighborhood I will have student population SIG of grade G. That means at each neighborhood, you have SIG number of students studying grade G. The distance to walk from neighborhood I to school J is determined as Dij. So now you're supposed to formulate the model to determine the number of students from neighborhood I going to study at school J for grade G, minimizing the total distance traveled. So what we're trying to do is to try our best to allocate students to school, to the nearest school as a global minimum. So I let I be neighborhood, J be school, G be grade, CJG is a capacity, number of seats available at each school for each grade. SIG is the number of students from neighborhood I going to study grade G. Dij is the distance between I and J. And this is our decision variable, Xijg. Number of students from neighborhood I going to school J for grade G. So let's define our objective. Our objective is to minimize the total distance traveled, and that will be the number of children going to school multiplied by the distance they have to walk. There are three summation signs here because we have to sum up for all the neighborhoods, sum up for all the schools, and sum up for all the grades. And we are subjecting this problem to constraints. Our first constraint is the total number of children coming from all the neighborhoods. So I'm summing up all the neighborhoods going to study at a particular school J for a particular grade G. must be less than or equal to the capacity of the school. So it cannot exceed the capacity of the school. Then I sum up all the schools, Xij, meaning that the number of children going to the different schools from neighborhood I for a particular grade G must be equal to the population of the number of children from neighborhood I studying grade G. So now looking at this formula, this is the first time that we see an equal sign. Why is it that we use an equal sign here? You might be thinking, should I just use a less than equal sign? So for here, you have to use an equal sign because a less than or equal sign will not be able to get an answer. The reason is because we are minimizing the total distance traveled. If I were to do that, Xijg can jolly well be 0. So which means I don't allocate children to go to school. They don't have to walk to school. If they don't have to walk to school, then I'm achieving a minimum distance. So in order to make sure that all children go to school, the equal sign here will force the solver to start allocating children to go to school. All right, so this constraint is necessary to be set as equal. And finally, there is another equation here, which is not a constraint, but rather a necessary condition, which means that the total demand cannot exceed the supply of the number of seats at each school. So let me just bring you to the Excel so you can understand what I'm talking about. So this is the last problem. This is a 3-dimensional problem. I have to explain the worksheet a little bit. I have 3 neighborhoods, 6 schools, 5 grades. These are the 5 grades. These are the 6 schools. These are the number of seats available at each school for each grade. For a particular grade 1, I sum up the total number of seats available from all schools. This will be the total available for all the grades. For neighborhood 1, 2, and 3, for the different grades, these are the number of children having to study at different grades. If I sum up for a particular grade, that would be the total number of children having to study grade 1. And do that for grade 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is the demand. It cannot exceed the supply. So for now, you can see that the same numbers. So demand is equal to supply, which means that there will be an answer. If demand exceeds supply, then there will be no answer to this problem. And finally, another table, neighborhood I to school J, and this is the distance apart. So all these 3 tables are inputs to the model. That means they are input parameters that you know before you even start. And on the right-hand side, I have 3 tables. As mentioned, Excel is a 2-dimensional tool. I have to solve a 3-dimensional problem. The only way is I repeat the 3rd dimension. So I will repeat the neighborhood. So I have neighborhood 1, neighborhood 2, as well as neighborhood 3. So for neighborhood 1, I would then have the number of grades 1 to 5, number of schools. These yellow cells would then be the number of children from neighborhood 1 going to study a particular school for a particular grade. If I sum up for school 1, this will be all the children going to school 1 for the different 5 grades from neighborhood 1. And the distance traveled will be all the children from neighborhood 1 going to school 1 multiplied by the distance between neighborhood 1 and school 1. And I do that for all the schools. I can sum up the total distance traveled. This number here sums up all the children from neighborhood 1 going to all the 5 different schools. All right, sorry, 6 different schools. And this number over here must be equal to the population of neighborhood 1. So the same argument can be said of neighborhood 2 and neighborhood 3. And I will get 3 different distances, 1, 2, and 3. And I sum it up, will be the total distance traveled for all the children from all the neighborhood to all the schools studying all the 5 grades. And finally, there is a table below which sums up all the neighborhoods for a particular grade for a particular school. And this table over here cannot exceed the capacity of the school. So you can see that this is a three-dimensional problem and it starts to get a little bit complicated. And this is using Excel to solve. Of course, our world, we have more difficult problems than this, and perhaps even Excel cannot solve. We have to then go on to other tools. So for this problem, it is slightly more difficult, and I've already set up the solver. And you can see that the solver is a lot more complicated. I don't intend to reset this, otherwise it's going to take too much time. So the objective is R4, which is this particular total distance traveled cell, and we would like to minimize this cell. Our changing cells, you can see that it's a very long line here because it represents the three areas of the yellow cells that must be determined by solver to find the best answer. We have multiple constraints here. The first constraint, the fourth constraint, and the seventh constraint, they all have equal sign. They refer to our number of children going to school must be equal to the population of that neighborhood. And I have integer, integer, integer. So this is the first time you're looking at integer problem. Why must it be integer? Because the number of children going to school must be integer. And then you have a greater than or equals to, greater than or equals to, and greater than or equals to, because we want the number of children going to school to be greater than or equals to 0. If you do not put this constraint, solver may end up determining negative numbers in the yellow cells because we are minimizing total distance traveled. So this non-negativity constraint must be there. And finally, there is one last constraint which has a less than or equal sign, which refers to the number of children going to school to a particular school J for a particular grade G cannot exceed the capacity of the school. All right, so this is how it is defined. And now this is an integer problem, and I'll start solving it. And you will notice that it takes a long time to solve. All right. The reason why it takes a long time to solve, because this is an integer problem. Integer problems are much harder to solve than non-integer problems, and you can see that it takes a long time to solve. I'm going to click that. And you can see that it takes a lot more time than the earlier problems that we saw. It will probably take around 10 seconds to 12 seconds. Yep, there you are. It found an integer solution. And you can see that all the answers are strictly integer. And that's how the problem is solved. So I'm going to move on. So I've covered 3 different problems. They are of different nature. I want to show you how prescriptive analytics can be used to find the best answer in analytics problems. And of course, today I'm showing you some simple problems, and our world is more complicated than that. So I will now move on to introducing the program that we are sharing today. This program is called the Master of IT in Business, or in short, we call it an MITB program. It's offered by our School of Computing and Information Systems. Singapore Management University has 6 different schools and 2 different colleges. We are the only technical school, or the technology school, that offers this degree. And why Singapore Management University needs a computing and information system school? Because the world of business and management is the largest user and consumer of IT and systems. MITB program is one of the many programs that are offered by our school. This is a professional master's program which trains professionals to be ready for the industry with deep technical skills. MITB started in the year 2007. This year we are on our 16th year. And we started off with only 1 track in fintech. And then in 2011, we have our 2nd track in analytics. In fact, in 2011, we are one of the earliest, perhaps even the first in Asia, to launch a degree in data science. In 2018, we added our 3rd track in artificial intelligence. And in 2021, we added our 4th track in digital transformation. If today you are thinking of joining our program, you can choose to specialize in one of these 4 tracks. Over the years, we have increased our intake, and the different color bars shows you the number of students from each of these tracks. We have taken in more than 2,000 students over the last 16 years and graduated more than 1,600 students. In the system, we still have close to about 500 students who pursue the program either part-time or full-time. MITB is ranked on QS. We are highly ranked on QS in Asia as well as globally for 5 consecutive years. In fact, we are ranked as Asia #1 in the year 2019 and 2020. Our program offers a wide range of different courses which can be of interest to many, many students. We have a total of more than 50 courses. Courses could mean subject or modules to you. So our courses are divided into FinTech, Analytics, AI, Digital Transformation, IT Management, as well as Practicum. Our students have very strong employment outcomes. This is the results of the class of 2021, where you can see that more than 91% of our students are getting jobs within 6 months of graduation. This slide shows you the class of 2021, the average salary. We are talking about Singapore dollars here. So they are actually drawing very respectable pay upon graduation from the program. And they either work from the country where they came from or they work in Singapore. Majority of them would work in Singapore. Application to MITB program, a good bachelor degree in any field. We welcome students who are either technical or non-technical. If you're non-technical, for example, you have a business degree or economics degree, you are also welcome. As long as you have the aptitude and the desire to learn data science and technology, we will be able to train you very well. There is an entry requirement apart from the bachelor degree. You have to do an admission test. It's your choice, all right? Either you can choose to do a GMAT, a GRE, or even a very own SME admission test. You can actually apply to the program. If your earlier education is not in English, we will require you to take either the TOEFL or IELTS. Among the 4 tracks, the digital transformation track has an additional requirement because for this track, we want to attract more mature students who have more working experience because digital transformation require the applicant to know more about the business problems. So 3 years of work experience is preferred, but occasionally this track do take in young students who have the desire to pursue this track. Apply now. If you were to apply now today, you can have the application fee waiver code, which is MITB SEGE 1023. All right. So by using this code, your online application fee of $100 is waived, which means application is free. All right. The other registration fee of $500 and the tuition fee of $51,840 is only payable after you accept the program. So registration fee, when you accept the program, $51,840 is actually payable over 3 installments during your candidature with us. So we do not take in the $51,840 at one go. It will be split into 3 different billings. If you are more interested in the other details of the program, we have upcoming events in March. On the 1st of March at 7 o'clock, it will be the detailed information session where the different directors will share with you the details of the 4 different tracks. If you're interested in digital transformation, we have a masterclass on digital transformation on the 7th of March. It will be delivered by the Digital Transformation Track Director, Professor Ho Siu Lun. And if you're interested in FinTech, there is another masterclass on the 22nd of March. And this is actually delivered by the FinTech Track Director, Patrick Teng. All right. So this is the end of my presentation as well as sharing of the program. I will now hand the time back to the organizer.
Great. Thank you, Professor Chong. This was extremely insightful. And there are some questions coming in from the audience as well. Firstly, to the audience, the application fee waiver code is on your screen right now. We'll also put it in the chat window very shortly. I want to encourage everyone to ask questions. This is your opportunity to get as much insight into this field from an expert as you can. So please ask your questions in the Q&A box, and I would pick up the relevant questions to ask Professor. You can also upload the questions which have been asked by others. So the first question that I have, Professor, for you, this is from, I want to take up a question which has just been posted. This is from Sanjeet Jaina, who is asking that in the event registration page, we had spoken about how cab companies optimize pricing. How do they look at optimizing pricing for various companies? So companies like Uber, Ola, Grab do that. So his point is that a prescriptive analytics problem, especially if you don't have the data, or it also seems to be a non-linear problem as such. And his point is that setting too low a price will not be ideal for the car hailing companies, while setting too high a price will not get them many customers. So how do car hailing apps actually optimize this pricing, and how do they optimize their revenue?
Okay, that's a very, very good question. It's a very complex problem, which is not shared today, while I kind of use it to describe a prescriptive analytics problem. This car sharing company will have to determine what kind of parameters will affect the pricing. All right, maybe you do, as what you pointed out, if they set it too low, they are not earning enough. All right, they could have earned more. If they set it too high, maybe there's no customer. So there will be input decision variables that will decide what would be the best price to set. It could be the demand, it could be the supply, it could be the traffic condition. So you are rightly, as you have rightly pointed out, it's a non-linear problem, and therefore it's harder to solve. Non-linear problems, you probably have to use the more advanced tool to be able to solve them. So they would actually do their own research to find out what are the input variables that will affect the output, which is the pricing.
All right. Thank you. And as you correctly said, possibly a very complex problem, especially in countries in Asia, Pacific, India, and Singapore as well. So thank you for those insights. Professor, the next question I have is from Sakshi, who is asking about career opportunities in Singapore for a posted data analytics masters. What are the average salaries and possibilities of getting a work visa?
Okay. Just now I've shared with you our class of 2021, their average salary. Let me just flash that slide again. So you can see the average salaries of the 3 different tracks. We haven't got any students who have graduated from the digital transformation track yet. Maybe we have, but we did not do the survey yet, because this is based on class of 2021. So these are the salaries, as you can see, those who have graduated from analytics track, those who have graduated from the fintech track, as well as those who have graduated from the AI track. So these are Singapore dollars, mind you. So they are actually doing quite well in Singapore. Regarding the part on the work visa, this is actually beyond the control of the university. This is actually controlled by our immigration department. And I must say that talents in data science are in shortage, even in Singapore. So most of our students are able to find job quite easily. So even if, let's say, they are unsuccessful in one company due to the number of employment pass that's limited for a particular company, they can always look for other opportunities in other companies who may have higher number of employment pass. So I know I'm not answering your question directly, because we do not know how many employment pass that each company has. But on average, as you can see, 91 to 93% of our students can find job very quickly, within 6 months of graduation.
And Professor, on related lines, there's this question on how does the school support the students in their job hunt process? So what is the support offered by the career services team at SMU?
Yes. We have 2 groups of people. The first group is what we call the practical managers. We have 4 tracks. We have 4 practical managers, 1 taking care of each track. Just so you know, we are the only program in SMU that invests in practical managers to take care of students practical. All right. When we talk about practical, we are talking about internships with companies. And our program is very fortunate. We have more internships than the number of students. Our students are spoiled for choice, actually. And there's another second group, which is at the university level. We call them the Postgraduate Career Services Office. These are professional people who will help you to prepare your CV in a certain way, guide you, and then guide you to go through mock interviews. They will be the one that will be searching for job opportunities and listing them on the portal, and then maybe guide you to go through a mock interview so you can be more prepared for the actual interview. So these are the support that our university and our program offer to our students.
Interesting. And you do see a fair mix of opportunities outside of Singapore as well. So when I look at the pie charts of various countries, of course, a majority of employment opportunities are in Singapore, but you do still attract opportunities in China, Netherlands, South Korea, Canada, United Kingdom, and of course, India as well. So fair spread
Yes.
over there. Great, thank you. Professor, I know you already answered this question during your presentation. The question was around people coming from a non-engineering background into the program. And so I understand you do accept such applicants as well into the program, but how are there any prerequisite courses that they should take up before they come into the Masters in IT for Business?
Okay. Actually, 60% of our students are non-technical background.
Okay.
Only 40% of our students are from engineering and computing. The other 60%, they are from business, they could be from economics, accountancy, and so on. So for these students, we will give them pre-readings before they start the program. But of course, if you are truly interested, don't wait for us to give you the pre-readings. There are a lot of resources outside, online courses that you can take first. Maybe you learn a little bit of Python, maybe you brush up your mathematics before you even wait for our pre-readings, all right? So those are self-motivated students. They will go through some online courses themselves. Having said this, we will guide you. We will guide our students to become technical, all right, from non-technical backgrounds. So as mentioned, 60% of our students are non-technical backgrounds.
All right, that sounds good. So I think there's hope for the non-engineers like me as well to make a career in this interesting domain. The last question which I have is around the SMU admission test. So I understand the admission criteria is either a GMAT score or a GRE score or the SMU admissions test. Those of you who are looking for that particular pathway, can you guide on how similar is the test to the GMAT or the GRE, or what kind of prep material they can refer to be best prepared for that test?
I will try to answer this. My two other colleagues can jump in after I said this. SMU admission test is similar to the GMAT test. It is our version, all right? There will still be the quantitative, qualitative, as well as the last one, I do not know what they call that. Maybe it's more of a testing your IQ. My colleague can jump in later on. So this test is, you need to prepare, all right? You cannot come in empty. There will be material for you to try out. What is the SMU admission test? For you to prepare first before you take the test. The test is online, all right? You don't have to go to a test center to do it. Being online, that means that we will use proctoring software to proctor you while you take the test, just to make sure that you are the right person taking the test. All right, so two of my colleagues who are here, maybe you can share a little bit more.
Yes, hi Prof. Michelle, and hi everybody. Just a quick introduction about the SMU admissions test. Generally, it is a online test, as Prof. Michelle has said. The test is actually pretty fast. You are actually expected to complete it within 30 minutes, and in the test itself, you are actually tested with three different reasonings. Right, one of them is the numerical reasoning, verbal reasoning, and inductive logical reasoning. So of course, we do have a reading guide for you if you are interested. Of course, after you have applied to us, we will show you the correct way for you where you can actually find all this information. And we also have some sample questions for you to go through. But in general, I would say that You can also follow the GMAT style of learning, which this entire model is actually modeled from. Yeah. Thank you, Michelle.
All right. Any more questions?
Great. So I think, Professor, we are done with the questions. I just want to reiterate a few things and do a quick check. So I understand the application deadline for this year's intake is May end. Would that be correct?
Yes, for our August intake this year, the application deadline is 31st of May.
All right. So you still have a couple of months. My advice to the audience that if you are looking to apply for this year's intake, apply soon. As you know, that spots at any top school are always limited. So make the most of using the application fee waiver and submitting that application at the earliest possible. Professor, if the audience have more questions, want more clarity on the program structure or the SMU admission test, is there an email address that they can reach out to and contact to get their questions answered? I also understand you have a representative in India, so maybe they can reach out to that person as well to get guidance.
Okay, if you have any more questions beyond today, there's always this email that you can send to us, mitb@smu.edu.sg. So once you send to us, we will be able to address your queries. If you have questions on our SMU admission test, we can point you to resources to get ready for that.
That's great. So to the audience, I've posted the email address in the chat box as well. Make the most of it. Please reach out with your queries. Of course, the QR codes for scanning the brochure, the employment report, the upcoming events, everything is on your screen as well. I'm going to keep this live for another few seconds. So if you want to scan any of those codes, please feel free. With that, I also want to thank Professor Michelle for doing this wonderful session. It's been extremely insightful. I remember studying Solver in my B school during my MBA program and did struggle with it. And your session did open up, gave me a great refresher into the Solver tool as well. So thank you for doing that. I'm quite confident the audience found it extremely insightful. We still have around 190 people in the room, so I'm sure they found it useful and stayed in the room throughout the session for that. Thank you again for taking out the time to doing this insightful session. And please have a great evening. It's pretty late in Singapore, so please have a great night. And those of you who are in India or other parts of the world, please have a great evening and have a great day. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.